Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 2022-2023 AmeriCorps Missouri Notice of Funding Opportunity for new applicants. I'm excited to see all of you here today, and we'll probably have a few more people popping on us here as well too. My name is Scott McFarland. I am the Executive Director for the Missouri Community Service Commission, and it's our job to fund all of the AmeriCorps state programs across Missouri. So today, we're going to be giving you basically a 101 on national service, and some of you already have a pretty good understanding of national service, but I want to make sure we are all on the same page. And throughout the conversation, feel free to chime in either in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. I will stop at any time for questions, and we're also going to have some time at the end for questions as well too. My contact information is here, but also it's available on our website. So our agenda for today is going to be discussing the requirements of the grant to make sure you're all in the right spot before you enjoy this 2-hour presentation. But then also we're going to talk about the commission itself, national service, and its multiple different types of programming that is out there. And then go a little bit of detail on what AmeriCorps looks like here in Missouri. And then finally, we're going to go deep into the Notice of Funding Opportunity, talking about the requirements and how you apply. And then finally, we'll have some time for Q&A, but as I just mentioned, I am happy to stop at any time to answer any questions you may have. So feel free to chime in whenever. I've also got my staff here who will be monitoring the chat box to let me know if I've missed anything there as well too. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. The requirements for the AmeriCorps grant are as follows. It is a 3-year grant, so we operate in cycles of 3 years. However, you are applying for 1 year at a time. So the application you're going to submit to us, hopefully in the next few months, will be for 1 year. And then you'll continue that application into year 2 and then year 3. And then after the 3-year cycle is done, then you renew for another 3-year cycle. We're asking you to apply to recruit, place, and supervise at least 5 full-time equivalent AmeriCorps members. And just so you're aware, lingo-wise, you will probably see FTEs, which is full-time equivalent, and MSYs, which is a member service year. They really are the same thing. So we're asking you to place at least 5 MSY. There is no cap on how many you place. So if you have a program that wants to place 20 MSY, that's fine. But with a minimum we're asking for is 5. AmeriCorps members must be 18 years of age or older or 17 with parents' permission, U.S. citizens or legal permanent resident aliens, and they cannot be a convicted sex offender or convicted of a homicide. You may, as a program, determine that you want to put additional requirements on there, either educational requirements or additional background check requirements. That's up to you. But these are the minimum requirements to serve in AmeriCorps. There is no age limit. So I have members serving who are 17, and I've had members serving in the past who are in their 80s. It really doesn't matter. It's open to anyone who meets these requirements. You're going to provide to us, while you operate the grant, monthly expense reports so we can pay you the reimbursement for the grant. You're also going to be asked to provide periodic grant progress reports. Those are happening 4 times a year, and it's based on the data that you'll say you'll provide to us in the application. So there are no surprises there. You'll be just collecting the data and providing it to us quarterly. And then we're going to have you provide program evaluations once every 3 years, and I will get into more detail on that here in a few moments. And then we're asking you to attend a few virtual and in-person training events as required. I will go into those as well as we discussed today. And then take part in a few national days of service. And again, I will go into detail on all of that. So if you feel you can meet all these requirements, you're in the right spot. And if you have any questions on the requirements, I'm happy to answer them. Does anyone have any questions on those requirements before we dive in? Okay. So the Missouri Community Service Commission is here to promote all types of volunteers. The main bread and butter of what we work with is AmeriCorps, but we also promote what we call traditional volunteerism, which is any kind of volunteerism in the community. We were founded in 1994 along with the National Civilian Community, the National Community Service Act, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And we are housed in the Department of Economic Development here in the state of Missouri. We are a full-time staff, as well as we have governor-appointed commissioners who serve as our board of directors. On a day-to-day basis, if you are funded, you'll be working with our staff, and then the funding determinations are done by our commissioners. So what is national service? National service is any kind of federally sponsored volunteerism in the community. So national service has been around for over 100 years in one shape or form or another. Really started getting into being a force multiplier back in the 1920s and 30s, predominantly 30s, with the New Deal. But what we're talking about really became what it is today in 1993 with the National Community Service Trust Act. That kind of merged a whole bunch of different programs together into one dysfunctional family we call national service. And it established the Corporation for National Community Service, which is now referred to as just AmeriCorps, and that is the federal funder. So what happens here is we are utilizing federal dollars, and we act as a pass-through to where we subgrant those federal dollars to you. The act also required the establishment of state commissions, which is why we are here. And we provide AmeriCorps funding to focus on key national and local issues, which we'll talk about both of those here in a little bit. Expanding opportunities to serve those who may not have an opportunity. And really that comes down to, we do provide a living allowance, an education award. So people who may not be able to volunteer long-term because of an economic need, this potentially could get them volunteering that long-term time. We look to build capacity of individuals, nonprofits, communities to succeed. And you're going to see a lot of that throughout the process of AmeriCorps, that we are definitely working towards building sustainability, both on our member side by providing them professional development and training, so whatever they happen to do next, they're ready for, but also working to build up new partnerships in your community to where if one day the AmeriCorps funding is not there, there's still the infrastructure in place to ensure that those services are continuing. And then we encourage innovative approaches to solving problems. And this is the most important one I want to hit on. I'm going to be talking a lot about what AmeriCorps members can and cannot do during their term of service and what organizations can and cannot do on this grant. But if I don't mention something about what your idea is for your AmeriCorps program, it does not mean that we don't want to fund you. It just means that you may have an innovative type of service that we just haven't funded in the past. So if you have a question on, is my idea going to work or fit, I'm happy to talk to you offline about that and have a conversation to see if what you're thinking really does match up with AmeriCorps. But please don't be scared away if I give you a list of what AmeriCorps programs do and you're not on that list, because we are definitely looking for new ways of supporting community needs.
Scott, we do have a question in the chat from Brenda Butler. She says, hello, do you know if the VISTA program has a similar requirement with a minimum of 5 FTE on each site?
VISTA is handled directly from the federal government through their regional offices. The VISTA office for Missouri is the Kansas City regional office, and they handle things differently because VISTA is its own program. So you would need to reach out to them. If you shoot me an email, which is on the website, we'll be happy to link you up with the VISTA office, and they'll be able to go through that. I don't want to speak out of turn and say something wrong. So we'll get you linked up with the VISTA folks if you have a question about that.
Thank you.
And actually, Chris, if you want to go ahead and put Michael's email in there in the chat, that'd be great. Michael Laverty runs that office and he can put you on the right course there with VISTA. And I will mention what VISTA is here in a moment for those who have no idea what we're talking about. Anything else in the chat, Chris?
Nope, that was it.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
So national service is broken into two different kind of streams. The first one had been called Senior Corps for over 50 years, and last year it was renamed as AmeriCorps Seniors. And AmeriCorps Seniors, or Senior Corps, I probably will continue to call them Senior Corps until the day I die for many reasons, but is broken into three different types of service. I'm talking to you about what these national service programs are, not because we're talking about funding them today, because we don't handle any of these programs ourselves, But when you start putting together your application, one way you can strengthen that application is to do what we call cross streams programming. And that is reaching out to some of these national service programs that may already be in your community to work with them. So if there is an RSVP program in your community, I would definitely reach out to them when you're working on your application and talk to them about how you can partner this AmeriCorps program you're applying for with what they're doing. And it will only help your application if you do things like that. So the largest AmeriCorps senior program is RSVP, or Retired Senior Volunteer Program. RSVP, I have a couple people waiting in the waiting room here too. Let me get those folks in here. RSVP is Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. And to the two folks who were sitting in the waiting room, I apologize, we didn't catch you on there, but we just got started. So we're talking about what national service programs in there. And as I mentioned to everybody else, I'm answering questions as we go, so you can put them in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and ask a question that way. So Retired Senior Volunteer Program is thousands of seniors across Missouri who are working on a wide range of volunteer projects, including in-school, after-school activities, Meals on Wheels, community improvements, community gardens, the list goes on and on and on. So they are the largest of the Senior Corps programs. The other two Senior Corps programs are much more niche focused. The first one is Foster Grandparent Program. Foster Grandparent Program, I'm getting some typing here. Let me find out who that person is. And there we go, I think I got it. Foster Grandparent Program is matching seniors with youth, predominantly in schools. So you'll have a grandparent, as they're called, working in the school classroom to assist the teacher in managing the class, mentoring students, things of that nature. It's a really cool program, and there are several of them across the state. So if you have one in your area, again, I'd reach out to them. And the final one is Senior Companion Program. The Senior Companions are much like the foster grandparents, but they're linking seniors with at-risk seniors. And the goal of that program is to keep seniors living independently. So you have somebody checking in on somebody, making sure that they have a ride to their doctor's appointment, or they're getting their meals if they have meals being delivered to them, or if they need a ride to the pharmacy, they're doing that. Just ensuring that these seniors have a little bit of a help that they may need, and also more human contact for those who may be spending most of their times in their homes. We then get into the AmeriCorps side of things. And AmeriCorps, like Senior Corps, is broken into three different streams. As we were just talking about, the first one is VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. VISTA is members who sign up for a full year of service. One thing we're going to talk about here with our AmeriCorps state program is our members are going to be serving anywhere between 100 to 1,700 hours in a year. VISTA is not like that. VISTA does not have an hour requirement. They just sign up for 365 days. So if they're needed to be working Saturday at midnight, they're working Saturday at midnight. They're going to be doing capacity building. So they're working behind the scenes. They're not really working with the clientele, whatever that may be, the students, the whatever it may be. They're working behind the scenes. So they're working to fundraise, to write grants, to help administratively, to recruit additional volunteers who may be working on the front lines, and just helping to build up organizations or build new organizations that communities may need. Their main goal is the elimination of poverty. So everything that they're doing is focused on that. And as I just mentioned for the question in the chat, if you're interested in VISTA, we can link you up with the folks who do fund that, because that's not done in our office.
The email address is in the chat box.
Great, that's Michael Laverty, and he oversees VISTA for Missouri. So he'll be able to get you linked up. The next one is NCCC, National Civilian Community Corps. These AmeriCorps members sign up for 10 months out of the year, and they're sent to a regional base somewhere in the country. The regional base that we work with most of the time is out of Colorado. They spend a few weeks in Colorado getting trained up and ready to go, and they're sent out in teams on what are called spikes, or 4 to 6 week service projects. These spikes have the members working intensively in the community to do multiple service projects. They do them for 4 to 6 weeks, and then they head on to the next. The nice thing about NCCC is there is no dollar requirement for the community to get those members to them. The only thing they have to do is provide shelter and food while the members are there for the 4 to 6 weeks. So again, the reason why I mentioned these two programs to you and the AmeriCorps Seniors programs on the earlier slide is it really does strengthen your application. That if you are aware of the program already in your area of one of these programs, that you reach out to them and talk to them, and that you put in your application that you are willing to work with them and partner with them, because we do want these streams of services, sharing resources and working together. And of course, the reason why we're here today is AmeriCorps State and National. These are direct service members, so they're working directly with the members of the community, be it students, be it folks looking for housing, be it people looking for economic support, victims of disaster, veteran services, what have you. And they're going to serve, as I mentioned, 100 to 1,700 hours in a year. And they are focused on any kind of community needs. So unlike VISTA, which is directed to address poverty, our AmeriCorps State folks are directed at any kind of community need that you can come up with. And again, that goes back to the innovative search that we're looking for, new programming, as well as some other programming that we may already have. So that is it for the national service programs. Does anyone have any questions on those before I dive into what we're talking about here today? Anything in the chat, Chris? We good? We got another one in the waiting room. Chris, can you keep an eye on that, the participants?
Yeah, yes, it doesn't pop up for me, but.
Yeah, if you click on the participants, you'll see them.
Okay.
Okay. And then the person that just joined us, welcome. We're just kind of going over the programming here, and then we'll dive into the application in a moment. Okay, AmeriCorps State programs, what we're here for today. AmeriCorps State programs are open to public and private nonprofit organizations, labor organizations, community-based and faith-based organizations, institutions of higher ed, so community colleges, universities, technical schools, things of that nature, state and municipality, school districts, and other governmental entities. So you can be a state agency, you can be a school district, you can be a county, you can be a township, whatever. You can all apply for this grant. And then partnerships of the above. So what we mean by that is if you're a public nonprofit and you can really only handle 2 full-time equivalent members, but then there's a school district down the street that could handle 3, you can work together, have one of the 2 of you apply, and now you're up to 5, and you've met the magic number to apply for this grant. AmeriCorps service, our motto is getting things done. So we focus on direct community service. These can include, but not limited to, tutoring and mentoring students or adults, assisting crime victims, promoting health, environmental stewardship, literacy support, disaster preparedness and response, economic development, other community needs that you can come up with. And again, I stress this a lot because I want to make sure no one gets scared away. If your idea is not on this list, it does not mean we don't want to fund you. It just means that you're an innovative program. And we definitely want to talk to you about how you feel AmeriCorps members can help to solve or alleviate whatever community need you're facing. AmeriCorps members, the first and foremost, they are not employees. You are not hiring employees in this grant. You are hiring AmeriCorps members. I tend to call them volunteers because they're volunteering their time, even though they're receiving a stipend. Sometimes I get my wrist slapped on that, but it's just easier to call them that. But we really do refer to them as AmeriCorps members. And in your application, you need to make sure you're referring to them as AmeriCorps members. If you start talking about them as staff or employees, that's not what this grant is for. While the members are serving, most of their time is going to be that direct service, working with whatever your clientele is that your organization works with. But we are also going to be working to build leadership skills for them, building an ethic of service and supporting their ideas of continuing to be civically engaged when they're done with this year of service. We know that over 60% of all AmeriCorps members are going to continue on in the nonprofit or governmental world for their careers. So we want to continue to foster that idea that they can continue to build community long after their AmeriCorps service is done. Again, we were looking to strengthen your community by providing, obviously, the program, but also making sure that you're involving other community partners in this process. If it's just you in a silo, it's not going to be as impactful for your community than if you start reaching out to other organizations, faith-based, community-based, governmental entities, whatever, in order to support what you're doing. And if you can really talk about those partnerships in your application, it will strengthen your application and get you a better peer review score, I guarantee it. We also are looking to build those relationships, which is what I just said. Okay, so the terms of service. Again, I already mentioned that we require 5 full-time members or member service units, the exact same thing. So if you see one, it's the same thing as the other. You can determine in your application how you want to break this up. You could have one of these types, or you can have a mixture of them. I see a lot of programs have full-time members who start at the beginning of the year, and then they have a summer camp where they're going to have 300-hour members supporting the summer camp in the summer of the next year. That's completely fine. However you want to make it work for your program. But we do have the following: full-time members, which are 1,700 hours, or they count as one full-time equivalent or one MSY. 3/4 time members, which is 1,200 hours. And this is really focused on education programs because 1,200 hours is pretty close to what a school year is going to look like. And they're 0.7 MSY. Half-time, or as I mistyped it here, whole time, 900 hours, 0.5 MSY. Reduced half-time, this is where it gets a little wonky on the math, but basically about 40% MSY. Quarter time, about 26% MSY. Minimum time, 300 hours, 21% MSY. And the newest one we just added a few years ago, abbreviated time, or 100 hours, or just under 10% MSY. So again, you can do the math on that on your budget and determine how you want to make the 5 MSY or more. But there's definitely different options. And this is another one where if you're just not sure how to make this work, I am happy, or some of my staff are happy to talk to you and chat about how it's worked for other programs and how potentially could work for you. So feel free to reach out if you run into any kind of questions on that. Before I move on, are there any questions so far?
Yes, I do have a question.
Stephanie, go ahead.
My question is, looking at the, could you go back to the screen so I can make sure I'm calling it out right, the previous screen?
This one right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
For the MSY,
Mhm.
you require 5, and those 5, is that individually have to be 1,700 hours or?
No, so you could have 5 full-time, you could have 10 half-time, you could have a mixture of the above. It just depends on what you need, but we want to have at least 5 full-time equivalent. You don't have to have 5 full-time members. You may not have any full-time members, and that's fine. It just depends on how you want to set up your membership.
But the total hours that I need if I want the MSY is 1,700.
Yeah, the total
I'm
hours
just
for
trying to
one
get clear
MSY,
on it.
exactly, correct. So the total hours for one MSY would be 1,700. And you're going to find, because you can see there when you get down the reduced halftime and below, the percentages get a little wonky. So you may turn out that your math turns into 1,800 hours or whatever, but that would be, 1.1 MSY or whatever. So as long as you can get to the 5, which would be 5 times 1,700, you're good.
Okay.
So I just want to add to that, because I think I know kind of what you're asking. So that doesn't mean that your program is going to have just 1,700 hours. That's for that one individual member if you want a full-time member.
Okay.
So your 5 full-time, if you want 5 full-time members, then as you can see, the full-time equals 1 MSY, right?
Uh-huh.
But if you wanted all half-time members, then that's going to be twice the number of members that you're going to be supervising.
So instead of 5, it'd be 10 if I want them at the
Right,
halftime
exactly.
level. Okay.
And then
okay.
the other ones would be any combination up to that full time. So the 1,700 hours is not necessarily specific to your program, it's specific to the member.
To the member.
Yes.
Okay. Think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions on that before we move on? Okay. So member benefits, what does a member get when they're serving this service year, which could be anywhere between 100 and 1,700 hours. Full-time members are going to receive a living allowance of at least $16,502. And it's a maximum living allowance you can offer them is $33,004. I have never in my 16 years of doing this, ever seen a program provide the maximum full-time living allowance. So if you provide the minimum 16,502, you're fine. If you can find a way to budget to give them more than that, more power to you. But the minimum is 16,502. And again, can be used for grant dollars or some local dollars for your match as well. Less than full-time members are not required to receive a living allowance, but we do recommend that you provide them one. The reason why is because, again, they're providing a lot of hours of service, and it's going to be a lot easier to recruit these folks if you're giving them some kind of support while they're volunteering with you. The listing of what the maximum amount is for each of the types of service is in the NOFO. So there is no minimum, but there are maximums you can provide to less than full-time members. And again, this is grant funded, so it will be in your budget when you apply. The next piece is the education award. This is trust funded, so you're not going to put this in your budget. And I'll say this a couple times. You're not going to put the education award in your budget. This happens after the member has left your program. They'll receive this. So full-time members currently, and I say currently because as if you've been watching the news, we do not have a budget for FY22 yet for the feds. So when we do get a budget for FY22, I expect this number to go up a bit, but right now currently is $6,345. So that's 1 year of service equals $6,345. This education award for less than full-time members is prorated down. So a less than full-time member will get less than the 6,000. And there is once we do get the education award number, which we'll have here in a few months or longer, depending on how long it takes Congress to pass a budget, we'll have those numbers. So when you start recruiting people, you'll be able to tell them exactly what they'll be getting. Less than full-time members do receive that prorated award as well. The education award can be used to attend school or pay off student loan debt. And when I say school, I don't just mean universities. It can be community college, university, trade schools, technical schools, anything that has a certification program that is approved by the feds that you can use federal aid for. You can use the student loans to pay that off. If your member is at least 55 when they start service with you, they may either use the education award themselves, or they can transfer the education award to a child, a grandchild, or a foster child. So I do see a lot of retirees serving in AmeriCorps as a gift for their child or grandchild to help them pay for college. The trust will hold on to the money for the person for up to 7 years. So they have some time to spend it. So if they're just out of high school and they're not sure what they're going to be doing yet, they've got some time to figure it out. And then this is taxable income. We're trying to fight that. We're trying to get Congress to change that. But right now, it is counted as taxable income. So the members should be aware of that, that when they use the education award, it will show up on their taxes that year. I do see some of my chat just chimed in here. Let's see. What about healthcare coverage? That's about 2 slides away. So bear with me, Mary. We'll get to healthcare coverage. Along with what I just said, members also can receive loan deferment for their current student loans. This is not automatic. So the member is going to have to call their loan provider and make sure that the loan deferment gets started when they serve. But that is open to anyone who is serving, that it will stop their interest from accumulating and also stop their student loan payment requirements while they are serving. If they are a full-time member and meet income requirements, they are eligible for child care support as well. This does not come out of your grant. This is a stipend that comes from a vendor called Gap Solutions, and the member works directly with Gap Solutions to receive that stipend. So again, you do not have to budget for child care. That comes from a different fund. And then healthcare, and this is the first of 2 slides for this, Mary, so we'll get into more detail on it. So healthcare is required for full-time members. They must be insured. They can either be insured by another plan. So if they're still on their parents' plan or a spouse's plan, what have you, you're fine. But if they are not insured, you're going to be responsible for ensuring that they have the minimal essential coverage. This can be done in several different ways. First off, if you have an employer-based healthcare plan you can get them on, you can do that. There's also several insurance providers that have AmeriCorps specific insurance. One that we partner with is called the Core Network, but they are not the only one, and there's several out there. And then also there is the option to have the member themselves go to the exchange, purchase minimum coverage, and then you reimburse them for the premium of that, because the members themselves cannot be charged a premium when they're serving. That's all covered under either grant expenses or local match. And then we'll get into more detail here on the health as well too. Okay. So as I mentioned, it's minimal central coverage is what we're looking for. If you're looking at the exchange, that is a bronze level plan is what we're looking for here. Again, you can also provide healthcare coverage to less than full-time members if you wish, but you cannot charge the grant to that. So we're only going to allow you to use our grant dollars to insure full-time members. Again, members may not be charged a premium. And then the member may purchase their own insurance, but again, you'll have to figure out a way to reimburse them monthly so they are getting that premium reimbursed. Is there any questions on any of those requirements? I know the healthcare one gets a little dicey, so I'm happy to chat about it now or also chat offline if you have questions about it. I've also spoken to several different HR offices over the years about how to make this work in organizations, so I'm happy to help wherever I can to make this work for you. Let's see, I got another chat here. Okay, Mary saying thank you. Not a problem, Mary. Okay, we're going to continue to move on here. So we've talked about what members can do. Let's talk about what members can't do. Now, it's important to note that my first piece here on this slide says that AmeriCorps members and staff may not do the following. What we mean by that is if you put a staff person on your grant, and there's on the budgets, and we'll talk about budgets here in a moment, section 1 is where your staff go. If you put a staff person on there, while they're charging to the grant, they cannot perform any of these activities. So if you put your executive director on there for 10% of their time, 10% of their time, they can't be doing this. This is also why if you know that your organization staff is in charge of advocacy all around, like if you're a community development program and you're going to be talking about legislation, that's fine, but make sure you don't charge any of your staff 100% of their time to the grant, because if you charge them 100% of their time to the grant, they're not going to be able to do that for you because they're going to be required to follow these activities or these private activities throughout the hours they work for you. And it's the same with members during their term of service. While they're logging hours or whether they're wearing the AmeriCorps gear, they may not do any of what I'm going to list off. What they do on their own free time is up to them. But while they're logging hours with you through AmeriCorps, they cannot do these. So that includes attempting or to influence any legislation. So calling a member of Congress and asking them to vote for the debt ceiling or not for the debt ceiling is against the rules. They cannot organize or participate in any protests, petitions, boycotts, or strikes. This is a big one for some of your organizations. I understand that petitioning is a big part of a lot of community organizations. That's completely fine for your organizations, but the members can't be involved and your staff can't be involved while they're charging time. They cannot displace or duplicate existing employees, positions, or contracts. What this means is if you had somebody on your staff doing a position and because of layoffs, you let them go, you can't put an AmeriCorps member into that position. The AmeriCorps members are here to expand what you're doing, not to replace or displace what you do. They cannot engage in partisan political activities or attempt to influence an election. This program for this year is going to be started up in 2022, which will be a midterm election. So we want to make sure our members are very much aware that on their own personal time, they can do whatever they want. But while they're wearing that A and while they're charging time, they can't be involved in any of that. They can't take part in events that are likely to be political. So if there's a rally and we have a pretty good idea that it's going to get political or electioneering, the members can't participate in that during their time either. They cannot engage in religious instruction, worship, or proselytization. This does not mean, I got another person in the waiting room here. This does not mean that they can't be working with a faith-based organization. In fact, we fund faith-based organizations all the time. The thing is, the members have to be involved in the direct service piece to the community. not the proselytization piece. I'll give you an example. I've had AmeriCorps members doing mentoring in religious private schools, and that's completely fine. But when the school day starts and there's an opening prayer, the members don't involve themselves in the prayer. And then when the education starts, the members get more back involved in what's going on with the education. So you just got to make sure there's a line there between the religious activities and the service activities. Members cannot provide a direct benefit to a business, a labor union, a partisan political organization, a nonprofit organization not in good standing with the feds, or again, participate in religious activities. We are in the Department of Economic Development, so it's important to note that if members are working to provide support to a community and that may support multiple businesses, that's completely fine. They just cannot provide direct service to a business entity. They also cannot conduct voter registration drives, even though many of us, myself included, would probably argue that voter registration drives don't actually have to be political. The members still cannot be involved in it. And then the final big one is provide abortion services or referrals. This is the one that is most likely to get you shut down as a federal organization grantee if you do it. So you need to be very clear with your members and your organizational staff that no services or referrals can be made by the members while they're logging time and while they're wearing that AmeriCorps A. Any questions so far on any of that? I've got a typo here because I tried to fix it today and I didn't fix it correctly. So currently, Missouri has 22 programs, not 12. I swear I can do math, just not today. So we have 22 programs, 5 of which are competitive, 17 are formula. You'll know what those two terms mean in a few moments. We currently have 437 service sites in 41 counties. And I just looked today and we're going to have 759 members throughout the year. But currently, because our year is just starting out for 21, we're a little bit over 500 members serving right now. The federal grant for the current year is $6.4 million. And then that is being matched by our local programs at a tune of $6.9 million. So, and we'll talk about match here in a little bit as well. So what are we asking you to do? As I mentioned earlier, we're asking you to recruit the members, which means you're going to be interviewing and onboarding them. We will also post your positions to statewide and national recruitment boards. But at the end of the day, we're not going to be saying, here's your member. It's going to be up to you to recruit that person. We're going to have you complete the background checks on the members and staff, and we will talk more about that here in a little bit. You're going to be tracking their time. You're going to be supervising them. You're also going to be working to provide any kind of training that they may need, both in terms of your organization, but also additional trainings that we may ask you to provide as well too, which are listed in the notice of funding opportunity. And then you're going to be in charge of exiting out the members. That includes evaluating the members on their service, as well as making sure that they're completely exited out so they can, hopefully, if they've completed their term of service successfully, access that education award when they're done. Does anyone have any other questions on any of that so far? And do we have any in the chat? Nope. Okay. So background checks. This is a grant expense, so you can put this in your budget and we will pay for it. But all members and staff listed in your budget, and that's in the section 1 of your budget, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, must receive the following background checks. So that means if your organization has a staff person who's been with you for 20 years, and they're going to be overseeing this grant next year, if they did not have received these checks when they were hired, you do need to run these checks, even if they're already currently employed, because we need to make sure that everyone that we cover on this grant have the same background checks completed. This includes FBI fingerprint check, state of Missouri name-based check. If they are living in a different state, the state of residency check, and then a search of the National Sex Offender Registry. There are national vendors available for you to use for this. They're called TrueScreen for the state checks and FieldPrint for the FBI checks. However, you can use your own vendors if you do wish. It's up to you how you want to do that. If your organization already has a vendor in place to do staff background checks, you can, as long as they're running these checks, you can use them as well. The background check expenses can be charged to the grant, or you can cover them as part of match. The key here again is no one may serve in AmeriCorps or be funded with AmeriCorps dollars if they are a registered sex offender or if they've been convicted of a homicide. Now, if you as an organization determine that there are other things in somebody's background that you do not want to have them serving for one reason or another, you may do that. But the only requirements that we put on is, again, no sexual offense and no homicide. As an organization, we're going to request that you participate in some of the following events, or all of the following events during the year of service. And most of these will be put into your budget in one way, shape, or form. The first one is we are going to have a program director training. For you all, if you do get funded, this will be the first time that you'll meet all the other programs that we're funding for the year, and we'll hopefully at that point in 2022 meet in person. It usually is around June or July, just depending on when we can lock down the dates. And that's usually held somewhere in central Missouri. We are based in Jefferson City, but if I can get us out of Jefferson City, I'm okay with getting us out of Jefferson City. So you'll want to send at least one staff to that. I would recommend you send at least two, especially if you have a fiscal department and a program department, because we will be talking fiscal stuff as well as programmatic stuff during those trainings. We also have a once a month call, which is done over virtual, and that is one person from your staff needs to attend those calls once a month. That's where we provide updates and also provide additional training throughout the year. When we have AmeriCorps opening day, this is an event that we hold in Jefferson City at the Capitol, and this is where we have your members come in October to be sworn in for their year of service. It's a one-day event, so you'll need a budget to get your members and staff to this event in October. We anticipate having a lot of these dates locked down, hopefully soon after the beginning of the year. So you'll know exactly when these are coming up, but I'm just giving you kind of the time of the year at this point until we get these dates locked down. And then if we have any other trainings that we may deem necessary throughout the year, we'll ask you to do those too. The one that I do know that is in the NOFO right now is a regional training that is done by multiple states. This coming year, before your application will be funded, it's going to be in Milwaukee. The 2023 is the first year you would attend, and we don't know where that's going to be in. I'm kind of vying for St. Louis, but we'll see what happens. It may be in another state. And then we also have what we call Leader Corps. This is a representative body of AmeriCorps members. So what we're going to ask you to do is one or two of your members are going to be a part of this. 99% of their time, they're going to be working with you and serving with you. But we're going to have a couple times where we're going to bring them together and just have them meet with members from all over the state and discuss what's working for them as AmeriCorps members, what we can do better to support them, and then also maybe involve them in days of service and also provide them additional training that may be able to bring back to your members. You do not have to budget for this at all. If we do have them go anywhere, we'll pay for it. Just be aware that we're probably going to ask for one or two of your members to be participating in that program. And then we also have 3 days of service throughout the year that we ask you to participate in. That is Martin Luther King Day of Service, which is in January, AmeriCorps Week, which is in March, and the 9/11 Day of Service, which is on 9/11. These are projects where you do not have to make your own project, but if you wanted to, you could. But if a local school is doing a revitalization, send your members to that. If there's a food pack for 9/11, like we do in St. Louis every year, you can send them to that. And with AmeriCorps Week, it is a week, but we're not asking you to do a week of programming. We're just asking you to do something during that week. The goal of these days of service is obviously, one, to support your community a little bit more, but also we like to get that AmeriCorps A and your members outside of what they're usually doing throughout the year. So more people get to see what AmeriCorps is doing, and they'll understand that your program exists and that you're out there serving. And so the day of service is a way to get more eyeballs on what we're all doing. Any questions before I dive into the application? Do I have anything in the chat? Nope. Any questions? Okay. So, application itself. The timeline is as follows, and it's also on our website. Obviously, the NOFA was released September 14th. That's why you're here today. The last day to submit questions about the applications and guarantee an answer is November 5th. That doesn't mean if you email me on the 12th of November, I'm not going to respond to you, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to get you an answer before the application due date. So you want to make sure you get all those application questions in by November 5th. We then have the applications themselves. We do November 15th. And those will be going into the e-grant system, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. And then if you have other documents to provide, and we'll talk about those in a moment as well, those are also due into us on November 15th. So everything is due by November 15th. If you don't get in by then, we cannot fund you. If you look at the National AmeriCorps Notice of Funding Opportunity, which is out there right now as well too, you will see a due date of January 5th. That is not your due date. Your due date is November 15th. That January 5th date is for the states to compile all their applications and send it up to the feds. So if you see January 5th, please ignore it. Your application due date is November 15th. We will then look at selecting competitive programs between November and December, and I will talk about what that is in just a moment. And then we will do our peer review scoring, which we'll use external peer reviews for it, between January and April of next year. We anticipate knowing the competitive award information May of next year. And again, I'll tell you what competitive is in a moment. And then formula notification will be June. So I anticipate you will know if you are funded at the latest the first or second week of June. And the reason why it takes so long to let you know if you're funded or not is it's not only us making the selections, the feds have their say as well too. So that's what kind of drags things out a little bit. But by the first or second week of June, you're going to know if you're off to the races or not. Your program, if you're a competitive, will start no earlier than July 1 of next year. And if you're formula, which I think about 99% of you on this call will be formula, you will be starting no earlier than August 1 of next year. So everything you're doing in your application, anticipate that August 1 start date. It doesn't mean you have to have AmeriCorps members serving on August 1. That's the first date you can start charging our grant. Any questions on the timeline? Okie dokie. So I just mentioned competitive and formula. What does that mean? No matter what, you're going to apply to this grant the exact same way. You're going to apply to us through the application process that we're discussing here today. After November 15th, we're going to review all those applications. And for some of them, we will determine that for one reason or another, you may be able to compete nationally, not just at the state level. This may be that you have a really innovative type of program that we feel the feds would like to fund, or you are an organization that's been around for a while and we feel that you're strong enough capability-wise that the feds may want to fund you directly. What that means is if we determine we want to do that for you, we will submit your grant up to the feds for them to review, as well as us to review here on our end for the state level. And then those who aren't selected to move up to the competitive will still be in the formula selection process. And we'll review you that way. What formula is the state gets amount of money every year based on its population. It's a population formula, which is why we call it formula. And the formula grant funding is determined 100% by us at the state level. So the feds really have no say in who we fund that way. Don't get confused by this. Don't get worried about this. Really, all it is we take 2 bites at the apple to try to get more dollars into the state. So if I call you on November 20th and say, hey, I really think your application can be competitive, then great, you're going to get 2 bites at the apple. If I don't call you, you're still in the formula application pot, and we're going to still review you, and hopefully we'll still have funds to fund you if you have a strong application.
And basically what that means as well is that regardless if you get funded competitively or you get funded with formula funds, you will still report to the commission. We will still be your direct point of contact to work with you throughout the program year. So just to let you know that.
Thank you, Chris. I forgot about that. Yeah, no matter what, competitive or formula, we still write the checks and we still are the ones who are monitoring you. Okay, so there's a couple different kind of grant types that you can apply for. You're going to apply for one of these. You can't apply for more than one. Most of you, if not all of you, will be looking at the traditional cost reimbursement. This basically means whatever you budget in your federal side of your grant, monthly will reimburse you for your expenses. And you're going to have to budget for everything. You're going to have to budget for your AmeriCorps members' stipends, for your staff pay, your benefits, travel, training, all of that. You're allowed in your budget to request up to $21,600 per MSY. So to make the math easy, say you're asking for 10 MSY or 10 full-time equivalent members. That means you can request from us federal money to the total of $216,000. You can request less than that, but you cannot request more than that. Okay. Professional Corps is much more niche, and we may have some folks on here who are interested in Professional Corps, we may not. But with Professional Corps, these are actually recruiting full-time professional employees to serve in areas that are having a shortage. So if you're in an urban area and there's a teacher shortage, you can be recruiting teachers. And because they are being paid a salary as an employee, we don't provide them a living stipend. So the grant itself is much less. It's only $1,000 per MSY because we're basically providing your overhead and nothing much more. It's the same with the Education Award Only program. It is what it's called. You're not recruiting full-time members, and you're not going to provide your less than full-time members stipends. So again, you're not providing any stipends, which is the biggest cost of this grant. So we only provide $800 to $1,000 per MSY for that. And the last one is full-time cost fixed. This is not available to new applicants. So just ignore it right now. And in 3 years' time, after you've done an amazing job on your first cycle, we can talk about full-time fixed. But right now, you're either going to be traditional cost, reimbursement, Professional Corps, or Education Award Only program. And I haven't looked at each one of your organizations yet, but I'm going to guess most, if not all of you, are going to be that traditional cost reimbursement, which again allows you to ask for $21,600 per full-time equivalent. Any questions on that?
Yes, could you explain that one? The second one, the Professional Corps, one more time. I'm
Sure.
not quite sure I got that.
Absolutely. So Professional Corps is recruiting salaried employees in areas that have a shortage. Mostly it's teachers, but sometimes it could be police, firefighters, or other kind of service profession that is in need for the community that they just can't recruit enough people. And the way AmeriCorps works is, remember, we have that education award. So what you're basically saying is, hey, if you come teach in my school district, not only will I pay you what a teacher gets paid anyway, but I'll also give you $6,350 to pay off student loan debt. That's really what it comes down to. They're still AmeriCorps members, but they're receiving a salary, so we don't give them a stipend. Does that make sense?
Got it.
Great. And again, there's only a few Professional Corps across the country, so chances are it's not going to be you. But if it's something that works for your program, I'm happy to talk more about it as well too.
Well, the reason I asked because I was thinking if you were to get a retired teacher, but when you said salary, that cleared it up for me. I was thinking a retired teacher.
If you're looking to grab retired folks, you're talking traditional cost reimbursement because you're going to get a stipend. Okay. Application submission. All applications must be submitted into the eGrants system. There's a link on our website. I'll show you where all the links are when we're done talking with this PowerPoint. This system is not good. I'll be honest. I didn't make it. Missouri didn't make it. It is a federal system. Be aware that it is about 15 to 20 years old, and it acts like it's 15 to 20 years old. So I tell you this to just realize that chances are something's going to happen and eGrants is not going to like what you're doing. It's okay. I am on the eGrants help desk line at least once a week. If you run into a problem, give me a call, give me an email. We will work through it. However, November 15th is a deadline. If you run into a problem on November 15th, I may or may not be able to help you, which is why I say, make sure you apply early. Don't wait until the 15th. Get it in early. So if there is a problem, we can fix it. So when you go into eGrants for the first time, if you've never used it before, you're going to create an account for yourself, which will be your organization's account as well too. And you can have multiple people on the organization in the system. So if you want to have yourself and a program person and a fiscal person, whatever, you can do that. But when you sign up and when anyone else signs up, you need to make sure you have your EIN with you, because it's going to ask you that, and that's how it's going to associate you with your organization. So you will not be able to create an account unless you have your organization's EIN handy. So make sure you do that. When you begin the application, you're going to use the IDs that we provided, and I'll show you where those are. They're on our website. So just make sure you're clicking on the right one and you start the right application. This goes back into what we were just talking about with traditional, professional core, EAP. We want to make sure you apply for the right one. So I'll show you where those are here in a little bit. When you are putting together your application, the biggest piece of advice I can give you is never type directly into eGrants. You'll have a little box window where it'll say, put your narrative in here. You're going to be typing for about 20 minutes about your grant, and then all of a sudden that box is going to disappear on you, and everything you just typed is going to go away. Because again, eGrants is not the best system in the world. So what you should do instead is type it all into a Word document or whatever your word processing software choice is, and then just copy and paste it into eGrants. That way, if you close the box and it didn't save, all you got to do is copy and paste it again. So save yourself a lot of heartache. Make sure you type it somewhere else and then just copy and paste it in. When you're done with the application, you're going to see in your review section a button that says Application for Federal Assistance. It's a PDF. Click on that, because that's going to combine your entire application, narratives, performance measures, budgets, into one PDF, so you can see it all and see what we're going to see when you submit it. And this is how you're going to make sure that you're within the page limits that I'll talk about in a few moments. So if you print that out and your application goes to page 13, well, we only have a page limit of 10, so you're going to have to do some trimming. So that way, if you print that out before you submit, you'll know exactly what we're seeing. And again, as I said before, don't wait till the last day to do this. Your power may go out, the system may go down, what have you. I will do everything I can to support you and try to get your application in, but there are some times where if we're at the witching hour, there's just not much I can do. So please make sure that you're getting this stuff in as soon as you can.
And anything over the page limit, they will not review it. They being the peer reviewers, and we also will not be able to review anything over the maximum limit.
Yeah, and I'll talk about page limits here in just a few moments.
Sorry.
No, you're good. That's right. So along with putting your application in eGrants, you're going to have to email us some additional documents. This is not going to eGrants. You're just going to email it to us. And the email's there, and the email's in the application information. Again, these are also due in our hot little hands by November 15th. If we don't get it by November 15th, your application isn't compliant. We need your most recent organizational 990 form. That's your tax form. I can pull down tax forms from previous years using GuideStar, but your most recent one may not be on the system yet. So that's why we're asking you for your most recent one. Along with that, if you have any kind of reports or documentation or evidence, you're going to want to send those. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few moments. If you have a labor union concurrence letter, you're going to want to submit that too. Most of you will not, but some of you may. And then there is a financial management survey form, which is linked on our website. It is a 2-page, basically yes and no document. You'll have to complete that too and send it in. And then ignore the evaluation plan and evaluation report because you're a first-time applicant, so you're not going to have to worry about those. I will talk about them in a moment, but you do not need to worry about those. Letters of support is only for rural intermediary programs. What's a rural intermediary program? A rural intermediary program is a program that is going to be placing members at other organizations in rural communities. So you're not really working with the members directly. You're kind of acting as a sub-site, and you're placing those members at different organizations in different communities, which we really love those because we cover a lot more ground with rural intermediaries. But if you are going to be one of those, you're going to want letters of support from some of the sites you're going to be working with. So we know that you've already got some placements picked out. And then also your most recent audit for your organization. We want that submitted as well too. No other documents will be reviewed. I think it's great that you got a letter from your mayor. I'm not going to read it, so please don't send it. If you have an annual report, I think it's awesome that you have an annual report, but I'm not going to read it, so please don't send it. Just send the documents that we're asking for, okay? So what priority areas are we looking at? These are the federal priority areas. And again, I've stressed this a couple times and I'll stress it one more time. If you don't see yourself on this, it's okay. We will fund programs that don't fit a priority area. We do every year, so don't get scared off. But here is the main federal priority areas for this year. COVID-19 response and recovery, educational opportunity, which is working with K through 12 students to improve their educational performance, economic mobility, helping people move out of poverty, civic engagement and social cohesion, working with community support organizations to get more people involved in their community, evidence-based interventions, which are actually listed on the website of different interventions that are already known to do really well. So they're looking for more of those, and I'll show you a link for that as well too. Programs that work with veterans and military families, and also active service members as well too. Rural intermediaries, which I just talked about. Environmental stewardship and climate change programming. Faith-based organizations. So again, like I said, even though members can't be involved in religious activities, they can absolutely work with a faith-based organization. And then Academic Mobility Corps, which is a specific type of program, and actually the description of that is in the attachment to our NOFA. It's the only attachment. It's on the same document, so you can see it all there. I did see something come up in the chat.
Yes, there is a question from Devon Wilson. What if the organization participated with the AmeriCorps State in 2010? Would we still be considered a new organization?
Good question. If you have not received funding through AmeriCorps in the past 5 years, you are a new applicant. So you've got 11 years behind you, so you're going to be a new applicant again. Okay. Along with the federal areas, here's some Missouri priority areas that we want to focus in on. Geographic areas that we're already covering. As I mentioned, we cover 41 counties. We are really light in northern Missouri, central Missouri, and southern Missouri. So really, basically anything outside of Kansas City and St. Louis, chances are we're looking to fund areas in that. Again, though, if you have a program in Kansas City and St. Louis, I fund a ton of them. So don't be scared. This is just going to give you some bonus points if you are working in organizations that are in areas that we don't cover currently. Urban environmental stewardship programs. This goes back to climate change, but really looking at the urban renewal and making infrastructure more green, things of that nature. Racial justice programming, programming that works with the LGBTQ+ community, serving or recruiting people with disabilities. So if you have members who are going to be actively recruited who have disabilities, or if you're going to be serving people with disabilities, we're looking for you. Returning citizens, those are people who are coming out of incarceration or currently incarcerated individuals, serving them as well and getting them activated to where when they do come out of incarceration, they're going to stay out. They got another cool chat popped up. What about AmeriCorps Vista funding? Again, Mary, we don't oversee AmeriCorps Vista. AmeriCorps Vista is handled directly by the feds. Their regional office is based in Kansas City, and Chris will go ahead and put Michael Laverty's email back in the chat again in case you didn't see it. And he's the person you should contact about Vista. How often do Missouri priority areas change? Do they change with the administration? They are actually determined by the commission itself. So some governors will come in and say, hey, I really want this to be a priority area. That hasn't happened in the past few governors, at least. So really it is done by the commissioners and by the staff. That being said, most of these priority areas are new this year because I'll be perfectly honest, I'm a new executive director here in Missouri. I just started last October and a lot of these are mine. That being said, you are applying for a 3-year grant. So even though your budget and your performance measures are going to be 1 year at a time, even if we change our priority areas next year, if we've already funded you, as long as there is funding and as long as you are operating the grant well, you're locked in for 3 years. So don't worry about changes in administrations or changes in priorities. As soon as you get funded, you can assume most of the time you've got 3 years coming to you. Okay, and looks like Chris put Michael's information there. Great, thank you. Okay. Where was I? I got them all. Okay. Any other questions on priority areas? Okie dokie. Page limits. As Chris and I already mentioned, there are page limits for this application. For a normal application, it's 10 pages. For anyone who is a rural intermediary, you're going to be talking more about site structure and placement, so you're going to get 12 pages to do that. Your application page limit includes the following. The cover page. You do not create the cover page. It is done automatically in the system. When you click on that apply for application for federal assistance, the cover page will automatically pop up. That counts as page 1. So really, you're only getting 9 pages because page 1's already automatically done for you. So keep that in mind. Your executive summary and all your narratives count towards that page limit. What doesn't count towards the page limit is your performance measures, your logic model, your budget, or other documents. So your budget doesn't count, your logic model doesn't count, your performance measures don't count, just your narratives and your executive summary and that cover page. Continuing applications, none of you are continuing because you're all new applicants, so you can ignore that last one. Yeah, Nicole asked if we can get this PowerPoint. I'm going to be posting this to the NOFO page probably tomorrow along with this recording. Okay, so let's talk about the narratives. The executive summary is the first part. It is literally in the NOFO right now. Copy it, paste it, and fill in the spaces that are underlined. That's all you got to do. Do not write anything else. Do not add anything else. Just use that 2 paragraphs that are provided. We say that, and then somebody's going to give me a 10-page executive summary that's just going to waste your page limit. Just use what we provided you. That's all you need to do. Program design is going to be a bulk of your score, and that is going to be worth 50 points. This is going to include your theory of change and logic model narrative, not the logic model itself. That is done separately. But you're going to talk about your logic model and walk somebody through it with the narrative section. This is where you're going to talk about your community need and how the intervention of AmeriCorps members is going to help solve that community problem, basically. It's using some fancy words of theory of change and logic models, but at the end of the day, it is how are you going to solve a community need? This is also where you want to give me a lot of detail on what the community need is. Telling me not enough kids are graduating high school is not good enough because we know that. But if you tell me in my community, the graduation rate is 71% and the national average is 88%, well, gee, there's a significant problem with your graduation rate. Okay, I got it. So make sure you give details. Then we're going to be looking at evidence and your evidence tier and quality. I'll talk about that in a moment. That's going to be worth 20 points combined. Notice the priority area is worth 0 points. This is where you're going to say, hey, I'm a faith-based organization, or hey, I am a climate change organization. Just put that in there so they know that you're one of the priority areas. And then member experience. How are the members going to get a good experience serving with you? Are you going to provide them additional certifications that somebody can't get elsewhere? Are they going to have a pipeline to employment with your organization when they're done? Are you going to provide additional training? Things like that, that just say the members are going to have a good experience serving with my organization. The next big section is organizational capability with 25 points. This is your organizational background and staffing. Do you have the competency to do this grant? Compliance and accountability. What experience do you have handling other grants? Have you handled federal grants before? Have you handled AmeriCorps grants before? This is where you're going to talk about that. The culture that values learning. This is we learn from our mistakes. We evaluate ourselves a lot, and we make policy changes based on those evaluations. And then member supervision. How are you going to supervise these members? How are you going to ensure that they are conducting themselves as AmeriCorps members and they're serving their communities the way you want them to serve? And then finally is cost effectiveness and budget adequacy. This is worth 25 points. This is a narrative section where you're going to walk somebody through your budgeting plan. Your budget itself is going to be a different section that doesn't count toward your page limits, but this is just a highlighting how you're going to actually pay for this and how it's actually making sense. Let's see, I got something else in the chat. Okay, so thank you. Good, great. Okay, evidence. This is the most important part of the budget, in my opinion. And the reason why I say that is because this is where we get docked the most from the peer reviewers, because organizations usually just don't provide enough evidence. What I mean by evidence is if you say that your members working with a student for 4 hours a week is going to improve their reading skills, how do you know that? Is there a study out there that says that? There are a lot. Then you need to provide that study. We're actually asking you to provide 1 or 2 pieces of evidence that back up what you're talking about. And you'll see here there's different tiers. A pre-preliminary application doesn't provide any evidence that links up with what you're doing. Don't be pre-preliminary. Provide me something. A preliminary is going to provide some sort of evidence that makes sense and kind of correlates with what you're talking about. A moderate evidence is going to be peer-reviewed, like a university study that says, yes, this is how this works. Yes, it works. And then finally, a strong evidence is going to be something that really relates to what you're doing. Like it was done on your program as an experiment, and this is how it happened. Most organizations are not going to be strong. If you find yourself in preliminary or moderate, you are in a good spot. That's where we want you to be, preliminary and moderate. You can find studies at scholar.google.com, or there's an AmeriCorps Evidence Exchange, which we have linked on our website, which has a whole lot of studies too. The worst thing you could do is not provide anything. Provide something and you're going to be much better off in your application than if you don't. Okay. Performance measures. You're required to select at least 1 performance measure for this grant. You can make it yourself, or there's a menu of performance measures that are available to you that you can utilize. And again, that's linked on our website. Make sure you select at least 1 performance measure, because if you don't, you're not in compliance with the grant application. Couple pieces of advice. The output and outcome must align. So if you're saying the output is we're going to work with students, well, then your outcome better be what is going to happen to the students. What I don't want to see happen is our output is students and our outcome is parents. That's 2 different things. You're working with the students, but you're measuring the parents. If you want to measure the parents, then you better put your output as the parents. Okay. No double-barreled measures. This means that 1 performance measure should be measuring 1 thing. If you want to measure 2 things, make 2 performance measures. Don't merge them into 1. Don't make your outputs and your outcomes the same number. What I mean by that is if you're working with 500 people applying for housing assistance, and you say 500 people are going to find housing, that means if 1 person who applied for assistance doesn't get the housing, you just didn't make your outcome. So be realistic. If you think 80% of the people you work with are going to see advancement, then make your outcome 80% of your output. Okay. Ensure your PMs will align with your logic model. So whatever you put in that logic model document, make sure your performance measures align with that. And if you want to be considered for that second bite at the apple, you really need to pick a performance measure from the performance measure instructions that we have linked. You're not required to, you can make your own, but if you want to be at that federal level, you're going to want to pick something from that instrument. And don't overburden yourself. We just looked at an application from last year that had 14 pages of performance measures. I'm going to say it again. You're required to provide 1 performance measure. You may provide more if you want to, but you are required to provide 1 performance measure. Whatever you provide, we're going to expect you to collect data on. So don't kill yourself. Okay. Okay, evaluation plan report. You don't have to worry about this slide. as new applicants, we are not going to require an evaluation plan or evaluation report until year 4. So as I mentioned, it's a 3-year grant. So we will talk about this after you're funded and 3 years from now. Okay, let's talk about the budget now. The budget's broken into 3 different sections. The first section is all of your main operating costs. This includes your personnel, your staff. Again, if anyone you put on your staff, it's going to require a background check, and it's going to require to follow the prohibited activity requirements for the time that they're charging the grant. Only charge up to 100%. So if you have somebody on another grant for 50% and another grant for 50%, and then you charge them to us for 50%, unless they're working 150% of their time, you've mischarged all 3 of those grants. So make sure you're only charging somebody 100% across all the budgets you may have. Your personal fringe is next. That's any kind of benefits that are in charge to the grant as well. What I recommend on this is that you make sure you divide these out by personnel. So if you have 3 personnel, you should have 3 line items at least for your benefits. Don't lump all your benefits for all your staff into one line item. The reason why I say that is because when you are monitored by either us or the feds, we sample lines. So if we sample your benefit line and it's all your staff, well, now we have to start collecting information on every single person you have on your staff. But if you break out the benefits by personnel, and then we sample a line, then we're only looking at the information for your program director or your fiscal director or your executive director or your site supervisor, only one person, as opposed to everybody. So this makes it easier for you and break those out individually. Staff travel, this is where you're going to put any staff travel that you need to do or that we may require you to do, as we already discussed. Member travel, same idea. The members have to travel somewhere, or if we're going to ask them to travel somewhere like opening day in October, this is where you're going to put that. Equipment, this is anything that you're going to have that's over $5,000 per unit. So if you're going to go out and buy a big old copy machine or car or something, this is where you're going to put that. Supplies is any item that is under $50,000. You can bulk them up too. So we also require that you have member service gear. These are t-shirts, hats, whatever it may be that has the AmeriCorps A on it. You can buy your own from a vendor of your choice, or there is also national service stuff out there that you can purchase as well. With those, you can lump them all together because a t-shirt's not going to cost $1,000, hopefully. But if you do have an item that is over $1,000, you need to put that in your budget individually as its own item. If you're going to hire contractual consultants, you can do that, and you can have that in the grant, but you have to put it in the budget in the next section. And then staff training. So any kind of training you're going to have this grant pay for, you put that in there. Next is member training. We expect you to have some member training, because remember, this is not just about the member serving. They're getting provided professional development as well too. So if you tell us you're going to develop your members and then you don't budget for any member training, that's going to tell us right there that something's missing. So make sure you have that filled in. Evaluation. Again, you're not required to do evaluation until your second term of cycle. So unless you want to do an evaluation on your own for your own benefit, you don't have to worry about budgeting for that. And then any other operating costs, which includes the criminal history checks, recognition for your members, recruitment of members, office space, anything like that would go into the other program operating costs. Any questions on section 1 before I continue? Okay. Section 2 is the member costs. This is where your living allowance, I clicked the button. This is where your living allowance is going to be. So you'll see in section 2, it's a table, and it asks you how many full-time members are you going to have? How much is the stipend going to be, or living allowance going to be for each of those members? And you just do the math across the board. And then the second part is going to be the member support costs. This includes FICA, so the federal taxes. The calculation's right there. You just take the living allowances you have times 7.65%. Healthcare, if you have full-time members, you're going to need to budget for how you're going to handle the healthcare. And then workers' comp will have to be in there as well too. And that will be dependent on your organization, how you handle that. The last section of your budget is going to be administrative and indirect costs. You have a couple different ways of doing this. First off, in this section, you'll also see a list of match funds. So you're going to want to put in there where all your match money is coming from. If it's coming from funders, if it's coming from other grants, that's where you're going to put it in there. Keep in mind that you cannot use federal funds to match federal funds unless you have approval. So what that means by that is if you're getting HUD money, you need to make sure that HUD has approved you to use that federal money to match our grant. There are some federal organizations that will allow you to do it, but you need to talk to them to make sure that they'll allow you to do it. But if you have local match, state match, all of that is fine. You can use that here too. When you do put the match funds in there, make sure you know if they're secured, which means you already have them in the bank, or if they're proposed, which means you're intending to get them before the end of the program year. Both are fine. We just want to know which one they are. We do claim 1% of your overall grant to help administer the grant. That pays for some of my staffing, it pays for some of the trainings, and the calculation for that we'll go into in a moment. So keep in mind that we will hold back 1% of your federal grant in order to administer the grant. So you have three different options of how to calculate your administrative costs. The first one, which is what most of you are going to do, is going to be the 5 and 10% fixed method. And all of this is listed on the NOFO, so don't feel like you got to jot all this down. You can charge up to 5.26% of your total Section 1, Section 2 on the federal side, which is what we're reimbursing you for, as administrative costs. What this means is you can just say, my overhead is going to be 5.26%. It means you don't have to provide receipts. We'll just do it on a monthly basis based on what you spend down. You'll get an additional 5.26% to cover your overhead. You also, on the match side, can put up to 10% of the total budget as match overhead. Again, no receipts required. It's just assumed administrative costs. Again, part of this too, we will hold back the 1% of that. So really, you're getting 4.26% and we're getting 1%. And the calculation's right there, how you do that. It's also in the NOFO. The other two options is if your organization has a federally approved indirect cost rate, you can use that. Again, you're only going to be able to charge up to 5.26% of that indirect cost rate to the federal side, but you can use the rest on the match side. So if your indirect cost rate is 35%, then you can do 5.26% on the federal side and 29.74% on the match side. And finally, we have the de minimis rate of 10%. I don't recommend using it because it's the worst one. You only get 10% across the board, whereas opposed to the 15.26% or whatever your indirect cost rate is. But if for some reason your organization requires you to use a de minimis rate, you can also use the de minimis rate here. Any questions on reimbursed budgets? Oh, why did my thing die? My PowerPoint.
No, but while you're doing that, one thing I just felt like was noteworthy is that you will also need to make sure that you budget for member gear.
Yeah, it's in the, yep, that's.
Oh, sorry,
that's,
I'm jumping ahead.
No, it was already there. You just didn't hear me.
Sorry. Well, yeah, I just, since they're, new, you can budget for that on the grant side or the match side, but you do need to make sure that you budget for gear because we do take branding very seriously for AmeriCorps.
Yeah, basically, if the member's serving, they need to be wearing that AmeriCorps A because we need to know that they're AmeriCorps members. Let's see here. Let me get my PowerPoint back up because it died for some reason. Is it back up now? Okay. I gotta find another slide now. Sorry for those who are having to watch this. I don't know why the PowerPoint crashed. Okay, as I mentioned, most of you are gonna be traditional grants. So what we just talked about, that's all traditional. If for some reason you're a professional corps or an education award only program, your budget's a lot simpler. All you're going to do is in section 2, you're going to put your number of members you're going to have by MSY or FTE times your rate, which is up to $1,000, and that's your budget. So if you're professional corps or EAP, the budget's a lot simpler. But again, I think most of you are going to be traditional based on who I'm seeing here. Okay. So what's the match? We require a match for the first 3 years of funding at 24% per year. What this means is if you are asking for $100,000, we will give you $76,000. You have to match $24,000. Does not have to be cash. It could be in-kind resources too. If you have somebody provide a training that usually costs $500 and they're doing it for you for free, that's $500 in in-kind match. You just got to document it. Or if your executive director is on there for 10% of their time, you can take the 10% of their salary, 10% of their benefits, and you can charge as match if you want or however you want to do that. And again, on section 3, the administrative costs, you can charge up to 10% if you're using that 5 and 10 method, or you can charge up to your indirect cost rate. So some of you larger organizations, you may meet the 24% match just with your indirect cost rate. It just depends on how it is. But as you can see, over time, that will continue to escalate to where if you're funded for year 10 or beyond, you're matching dollar for dollar. And that goes back to the sustainability piece. We want to build infrastructure. We want to build sustainability. So by year 10, you should be bringing in more community support dollars to offset the federal dollars. That being said, we don't cut you off at year 10. You can go on. I've got programs that have been going since 1994, and they're matching at 50% because year 10 is the top. All right, we're almost done here. Grant writing tips, a couple of things for you just to realize and remember when you're writing this. And I know many of you already write grants, but it's always good to just be reminded. And personally, I have been doing this for about 16 years. And I also was a peer reviewer for the AmeriCorps grants and the Senior Corps grants outside of my normal gig. So I've kind of seen it from both sides. In my experience, a couple of things you need to do. First off is make sure you hold your reviewer's hand. Do not assume the person reviewing your application has any idea what you're talking about your organization and what your community need is. So give them a lot of detail, walk them through the process, give them all the information they need to where they can understand. And if they had to explain your organization to somebody else, they can explain it to somebody else. Along with that, you can see in the narratives I went over, it breaks it out by section. Your evidence tier, your evidence area, your notice of priority, member experience. Put headings into your application that just list those. So it's very, very easy for me to know, here's the member supervision section because they have a heading that says member supervision. Makes it so much easier to score your grant and you're going to get a better score. Along with that, do not use special characters. Remember how I said type it in Word first and then copy and paste it over? If you use bullet points or arrows or anything like that, it will not show up in eGrants. eGrants does not allow for special characters. So use hyphens, use asterisks, things of that nature. Do not use bullets because those won't transfer over correctly. That being said, I would definitely use hyphens because again, make it easier to read, make it easier to find everything. Let's see here. Okay. Never start in eGrants. I've said that a couple of times now. Make sure that you're copying and pasting. Don't just type in eGrants. I have done that. I have been dumb and I have paid for it. Do not type directly in eGrants. It will make you pay for it. Have someone outside of your organization review this thing before you turn it in. Again, so you can see if you held their hand. If they can read your application and know what the heck you're talking about, you're in a good position. And I know this sounds rudimentary, but we've read some bad applications over the years, haven't we, Chris? So make sure yours is not one of them. Have somebody else read it just to make sure they know you know what you're talking about and they know what you're talking about. And again, finally, make sure you click in eGrants that application for federal assistance. That will print out your entire app and let you see it as is, so you know where you are in terms of page limits. Just because you typed out 10 pages in Word doesn't mean it's going to equate to 10 pages in eGrants because it uses a different font, it uses different spacing. So make sure you're printing that out so you know exactly where you are. And as Chris mentioned, if you go over page 10, we just stop printing at page 10. So if you go into 11 and 12 and 13 and so on, that will never be printed out. Your peer reviewer will not get it. So if you're in the middle of a sentence on page 10, that's where it stops. So make sure you keep yourself to 10 pages. Or if you're rural intermediary, 12 pages.
And then my pet peeve, which I mentioned in yesterday's bidders conference, if they ask you a question in a particular section, answer it in that section.
Yes.
If you answer it in another section, as Scott stated yesterday, you're going to get a big fat goose egg, 0 points. You're not going to get points for it, even if it's in the application.
When I'm reviewing, yeah, I'm sorry. When I'm reviewing 20, when we're reviewing 20 applications, we don't want to go treasure hunting. Just tell us exactly where it is, where the answer is. It's going to help. Okay, a couple reminders. First and foremost, November 5th, we need you to get any questions you have into us so we can guarantee an answer to you. We'll also complete an FAQ document that will update over the time of the next few months. And then also we're asking you to complete the notice of intent by November 5th. The link is here. It's also on the website I'm going to show you here in a moment. Also, if you have any questions, as I just mentioned, make sure you email them by November 5th. Check back on the NOFO page often, which I'm going to show you in a moment. You've already been there. It's how you registered, but check back often in case things change. That way you're aware. And again, no applications and no documents will be accepted after November 15th. So I'm going to pull up our website, but while I'm doing that, are there any questions on anything about what we've talked about today? We'll take them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and throw them out there as well too. And I'm going to close this and go to the website. Any questions? Everyone's quiet. Means the presentation was good or bad, one of the two. Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, good. That was good. Go ahead.
Could you go over the grant types one more time?
Sure. So you have traditional reimbursement, which is going to be 99% of all the people we fund. And that's just going to be a normal, whatever you budgeted for, we'll reimburse you or you'll match. And that is going to be upwards of $21,600 per MSY. So if you have 10 full-time equivalent or MSY, you can apply for up to a federal grant of $216,000. Then there is professional core. Professional core is going to be where you're recruiting salaried professionals into a community that has a shortage on those professionals. It's usually teachers, but sometimes it can be police, firefighters, EMTs, other kind of service personnel. Since they're going to be professional employees who are getting a salary, they do not receive a living allowance. So your grant is much less because you don't have to pay for that. So that grant turns into $1,000 per MSY. So if you're applying for 10 MSY, it's a $10,000 grant. So much smaller. The final one is an education award only program. This could be any kind of programming, but you're just not going to hire full-time members, and you're not going to give a living allowance to any of the less than full-time members. So again, there's no living allowance, so the grant is much smaller. You're looking at $800 to $1,000 per MSY. Does that cover it?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, 99% of everybody who applies is traditional, and they're going to be looking at that larger grant, but sometimes you may find yourself in professional or EAP. Okay, I'm going to show you all the grants.
We have some questions in the chat, Scott.
Oh, go ahead, go for it.
We have a question from Jennifer Stoffel. Can members wear both the organization's logo as well as the A?
Absolutely, and most of our programs do that. You'll have like the example I have is Kansas City. City Year has their jackets that say City Year on the front and has the AmeriCorps logo on the side. That's fine.
Next question is from Becca Rendell. Is there a requirement for how much staff time an organization must contribute to coordinating an AmeriCorps state program?
There isn't a requirement, but I would say depending on the size of your AmeriCorps member group, you're going to want at least one person who's working close to full time on this to handle the recruitment, and the supervision, and the monitoring. So I've seen some smaller programs operate with one staff person, I've seen larger programs operate with 10 staff people in a varied amount of time. So there is no requirement, but keep in mind, you really can't do this with one person at 50% of their time. It's just not going to be enough staff time to cover the grant and the supervision.
So Becca, I think that answers your question about, does it have to be one person? If not, let us know.
It could be one person. It absolutely could, but keep in mind, it's going to be most of their time. Do I have the website showing? I can never tell if I'm sharing correctly.
You do.
Okay. Do we have any other questions in the chat? No. Okay. So this is the main website, showmeservice.org. You've already been here, I'm assuming, but if you go here for AmeriCorps grant opportunities, here is the current NOFO page. It has in there all the dates we just talked about, as well as the link to all of those down below. So here we have the actual NOFO, which is the application information. Mandatory supplemental information. This is going to include the information on evidence, so you can have that available to you. Performance measures. This is the menu of performance measures. So if you want to just have one created for you already, you can go in here and you can say, okay, I'm working with education. Here's the education section. Here's all the performance measures that deal with education. You can just pick one or multiple ones depending on what you want to do. Application instructions. This is where all the budgeting information is going to be. So all the calculations. There's also a really good budget checklist at the end. So what I would recommend doing is once you filled out your budget, go through that checklist and just make sure you've got everything in there. And that will make it a lot easier for us to review down the road. This financial management survey, this is something that all of you need to complete and turn in. It's only a couple of pages, and really you just have your fiscal office fill it out. It's pretty cut and dry. Evaluation plan template. Again, you are a new applicant, so you don't have to worry about evaluations right now. So we will talk about that sucker 3 years from now. And then the notice of intent to apply survey. This is something you do need to complete by November 5th. And really, we're just using this to get a better idea of how many applicants we're going to have so we can get enough peer reviewers ready to go for that. So please make sure you fill that out. Bidders conferences. This is where I'm going to put the PowerPoint and the recording once those get done, probably tomorrow, if not tomorrow, Monday at the latest. So you'll have those there. And National Direct is for multiple state programs, which I don't think any of you are. I hope you're not. So we're just going to skip that. And then there's also the technical assistance. Here is our email, so you can send questions to. Here is the evidence exchange that I talked about. So if you're looking for some evidence, there's a whole bunch listed here you can look at as well too. And then once we have an FAQ, that'll be right there. And then finally, this is the AmeriCorps Program Director Manual for 2021. We will update it for next year when yours start, but this is a really good way for you to have an idea of what we really expect when you're writing a program. And Chris, is that showing up, the PDF?
It is.
Okay. So I would really look through this. This like tells you everything. Like, how do I recruit a member? How do I make a position description when I recruit them? How do I handle staff files and member files? It's all in here for you. So if you have any specific questions, it really dives deep into the program. It also talks about how we monitor the program and how we reimburse the program. So I would recommend you take a look at that to get more information about the program itself. And then finally, back on the grants page, we have the link to eGrants. And then here's what I mentioned about how making sure you apply for the right grant. We have 4 application portals currently open. You're going to apply to one of them. 99% of you, again, are going to apply for traditional new. That's a traditional reimbursement, new applicant. So when you apply, make sure you're clicking on 22 AC 239-875. That's Missouri's application number for what you need to apply for. What you'll do is an eGrants, there'll be a drop-down menu. You'll say Missouri, and then you will see this number right here. So make sure you use that one to apply. If you're going to be a professional corps or an EAP new, which is a fixed or EAP new, then you're going to be applying to 22 ES 239-876. So either you're going to apply to this guy right here or this one right here. These two are for people who have already been funded, so ignore them. That one for most of you, this for maybe a couple of you. That is really all I have for today, and I got you out 20 minutes early. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself. We'll stay online until all questions are answered. I really am excited to see all of you on here today. I know we had some folks drop off. But there's some really good organizations here. I've kind of already looked for your registration, and we're excited to see, if not all of you, most of you apply. I will say too, this is a very good year to be coming on to national service because we are seeing increases because of COVID. So we had the American Rescue Plan, which has brought more money into the state, and also Congress is being generous to us. So we are going to be bringing on new programs this year. It's always competitive. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be a handout. You're going to have to apply and have a good application, but we will be bringing on new applications next year. So I hope that you're one of them. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them out. And if not, we will be done. I'm seeing some thank yous. Thank you right back. Going once, going twice on the questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay, everyone, thank you very much for your time. And if you ever have any questions, we are here to help. This is not a closed application. We can talk to you.
Christine sent me some information. I'm trying to catch it before you close out.
Okay, sounds good. But what I was going to say is this is not a closed application. We can talk to you. So send us questions. You got it, Stephanie?
I'm still writing. I got it now.
Cool. Have a good day, everybody.
Goodbye.